Welcome to Learn English Speaking. Let's Talk Stories. Here we bring you amazing stories to improve your English fluency. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting lessons. Let's learn together.
Chapter 1. Uncle Ralph. I can understand a broken neck or a broken leg, but not a broken heart.
Mr. Ralph Nickleby closed the thick book that contained the names of all the people who owed him money. His money-lending business was doing well, he thought with a satisfied smile. Life had never been better. It was true that he had never married, he had no friends, and he was unpopular with his neighbours. But he did not care. People admired him because he was rich, and that was good enough for him. In his world, money was the only thing that mattered. While Mr. Nickleby was congratulating himself on his own success, there was a knock at the door. A tall, middle-aged man with strange, wild eyes walked into the room. It was Newman Noggs, Mr. Nickleby's clerk. "What do you want, Newman?" Mr. Nickleby said, annoyed by his interruption. "I have a letter for you," the clerk replied, one eye looking at his employer, the other looking out of the window. "Well, bring it here, man," Mr. Nickleby said impatiently. Newman took the letter carefully out of his badly fitting suit, carried it slowly across the room, and gave it to his employer. Mr. Nickleby read it quickly. "My brother's dead," he said. "That was sudden." He stood up, walked across to the window, and stared thoughtfully through its dirty glass into the smoke-blackened yard behind his house. "Children alive?" Noggs asked. "Unfortunately for me, yes," Mr. Nickleby said. "Both of them. And the mother, too. No money, and now they expect me to take care of them. They're all in London now, waiting for my help. What do I care about them? I never met them." Noggs looked at his employer's back with a strange expression on his face. It was not exactly a smile, but it was not a look of sadness either. Nobody could ever understand the expressions on Newman Noggs's face. "Get me my coat and gloves, Newman," Mr. Nickleby suddenly decided, turning away from the window. "I have a visit to make." Mr. Nickleby walked quickly to the Strand, one of the busiest streets in London. He knocked several times on the door of a small house and waited. The door was finally opened by a servant girl. "Is Mrs. Nickleby at home?" he demanded. "You mean Miss La Creevy?" the girl replied. "No, I mean Mrs. Nickleby." "Show the gentleman up, Hannah," a voice called from inside the house. Mr. Nickleby walked straight past the servant girl into the hall of the house and quickly up the stairs. On the first floor, he met a small, bird-like middle-aged woman wearing black gloves and a yellow cloth tied around her head. "My name's Miss La Creevy," the woman said with a friendly smile. "I'm an artist. Would you like me to paint your picture for you? You have a wonderfully serious face, such strong eyes." "I'm not here for a painting, madam," Mr. Nickleby replied impatiently. "I'm looking for a Mrs. Nickleby. Is she here?" "A lady from the country and her 2 children have rented a room on the 2nd floor," the woman said. "She's a widow." "A poor widow?" "I'm afraid so." "That's her," Mr. Nickleby sighed. The servant girl led him upstairs and into a small room. When he entered, a woman wearing a long black dress rose from her chair. A beautiful girl of about 17 moved across the room to take her arm. A young man, 2 or 3 years older than his sister, stepped forwards and greeted Ralph as his uncle.
"You are Nicholas, I suppose," Ralph said.
"That is my name, sir," the young man smiled. Ralph did not return his nephew's smile, but turned immediately to Mrs. Nickleby.
"Well, madam, how are you?" he said. "You must be brave in your sadness. I always am."
"This is no ordinary sadness," Mrs. Nickleby said, putting her handkerchief to her eyes.
"I disagree,"
Ralph said, calmly unbuttoning his coat.
"Husbands die every day, ma'am, and wives too."
"And brothers also, sir," Nicholas said, already beginning to dislike his uncle.
"Yes, sir, and dogs and cats,"
Ralph replied, sitting down.
"You didn't say in your letter how my brother died, ma'am."
"Nobody knows," Mrs. Nickleby said, her eyes filled with tears. "We believe that he died of a broken heart."
"Impossible," Ralph said angrily. "I can understand a broken neck or a broken leg, but not a broken heart. It is an excuse for people who want to escape their debts."
"Some people, I believe, have no hearts to break," said Nicholas quietly. Ralph turned round in his chair and looked at his nephew with scorn.
"How old is this boy?" he demanded.
"Nicholas is nearly 19, said the widow.
19, eh? Said Ralph. "And do you have a job?"
"Not yet," Nicholas answered proudly. "But I'll find one."
"You'd better,"
Ralph said, staring at him with cold grey eyes.
"You haven't got a penny in the world, have you?"
"That's true," Nicholas said. "But don't worry. I won't need your help." Nicholas's mother begged the emotional young man to control himself, and asked Ralph to forgive her son for his rudeness. Ralph gave Nicholas another scornful smile, then turned to Mrs. Nickleby again.
"You say in your letter, ma'am, that my brother left you nothing when he died," he said.
"That's true," the widow said. "I've had to sell our home to pay my husband's debts, and I've spent the last of my money on the journey to London. I hoped that you would be able to help your brother's children. That was his dying wish."
"What can your daughter do, ma'am?"
Ralph asked. "She has learnt a little French and music."
"And have you ever done anything?"
Ralph said to Nicholas. "No," Nicholas replied.
"I thought not,"
Ralph said, looking again at Mrs. Nickleby.
"Your husband was a dreamer, ma'am. That's why he left you with no money, and left me with the problem of helping you. He was a foolish, selfish man."
"Yes, that's true, I suppose," Mrs. Nickleby agreed. "He never listened to my advice about money. I often think that I made a bad mistake when I married him." Ralph listened to Mrs. Nickleby's complaints about her husband with a half-smile. When she had finished, he looked at his nephew and said,
"Are you willing to work, sir?"
"Of course I am."
"Then I have something here that may interest you."
He took a newspaper from his pocket and showed him an advertisement. "Mr. Wackford Squeers' School for Boys, Dotheboys Hall, near Greta Bridge in Yorkshire, needs an assistant. He will be paid £5 a year. Mr. Squeers is staying in London at the Saracen's Head Hotel, Snow Hill." £5 a year isn't much," Kate complained, "and Yorkshire is so far away." "Be quiet, dear," Mrs. Nickleby told her. "I'm sure your uncle knows best." "And if I get this job," Nicholas wanted to know, What will happen to my mother and sister?
I will take care of them,
Ralph promised.
I will find your sister a job with a dressmaker that I know, but only if you take this job. Do you understand?
Then I agree, Nicholas said, forgetting his anger of minutes earlier and shaking his uncle's hand. I'll take the job, if Mr. Squeers will have me.
He will accept you. I can promise you that,
Ralph said.
Now, get your hat and coat, young man. We must go to the Saracen's Head immediately.
Chapter 2. Dotheboys Hall. Nicholas's heart was filled with pity for these poor children, who suffered such cruel treatment.
Wackford Squeers was a strange-looking man with flat, oily hair. His black jacket was much too big for him, and his trousers were much too short. But the strangest thing about him was his face. He only had one eye, which looked like a dirty window. When he smiled, it seemed to shine with a frightening green light. At first, Mr. Squeers was unwilling to accept Nicholas as his assistant because he was too young and had not been to college. But after a few quiet words with the boy's uncle, he offered Nicholas the job.
The coach leaves at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, he said. You mustn't be late.
Nicholas woke up at 6 o'clock the next morning and hurried to the Saracen's Head. While he was helping Mr. Squeers to lift a few small, frightened-looking boys onto the coach, he was surprised to see his mother and sister. His uncle had brought them to say goodbye. "Why didn't you wake us?" Mrs. Nickleby said, throwing her arms around her son. "You left without breakfast."
"There's no time for this, Nickleby,"
Squeers interrupted rudely, buttoning his coat against the cold.
"Get onto the coach immediately. One of my boys has already nearly fallen off. If a boy died now, I'd lose £20.
"Dear Nicholas," whispered Kate, leading her brother away. "What kind of place are you going to?" "I don't know, Kate," Nicholas replied, pressing his sister's hand. "I suppose the people in Yorkshire are rougher than people in London." "He's a nasty little man. He's so rude." "But he's my employer," Nicholas reminded her. Nicholas kissed his tearful sister and mother and shook his uncle's hand. Then he jumped up into his seat on the coach. However, as he was waving goodbye, an odd thing happened. Somebody started pulling softly at his leg. He looked down and saw a tall, thin man with strange, wild eyes. "What's this?" Nicholas asked, when the man pushed a dirty letter into his hand.
"You don't know me," the man whispered nervously, "but I work for your uncle. Take it and read it."
Before Nicholas could say another word, the man had gone. The journey to Yorkshire was long and uncomfortable. It snowed heavily on the way, and everybody felt cold and hungry. At 6 o'clock the next evening, they finally arrived at Greta Bridge. Mr. Squeers and Nicholas took the boys off the coach and put them into a small cart. "Is it much further to Dotheboys Hall, sir?" Nicholas asked Squeers when the cart had left Greta Bridge.
"About 3 miles,
Squeers replied.
"but we don't call it a hall up here, only in London, because it sounds better."
Squeers laughed to himself, and Nicholas stared into the darkness until they reached Dotheboys Hall. Then he understood. The hall was just a long, low, cold-looking house with a few old farm buildings behind it. While Nicholas sat in the cart with the boys, Squeers jumped down and shouted for someone to open the gate. Several minutes later, a tall boy in old, thin clothes ran out of the house.
"Why did you take so long, Smike?"
Squeers shouted. "Sorry, sir, but I fell asleep by the fire."
"Fire? What fire?"
the schoolmaster demanded angrily. "Mrs. Squeers said that I could sit by the fire in the kitchen to keep warm."
"Mrs. Squeers is a fool,"
Squeers replied.
"You'd stay awake better in the cold."
The boy called Smike opened the gate, looking nervously at Squeers. A few minutes later, Nicholas was standing outside the door with the boys and the luggage. He stared up at the cold-looking house with its dark windows and sighed. He was a long way from his home and family, and he had never felt so lonely. Life at Dotheboys Hall was very hard. There was no heating in the school, and the boys had to wash with buckets of icy water in the mornings. They wore the same clothes every day, and they were always hungry. Mrs. Squeers fed them a thick, horrible soup every day, which Mr. Squeers called their medicine. It was the cheapest food that they could find. The classroom was cold and dirty, with broken windows. There were a couple of old, long desks for the children, and 2 desks at the front of the room, one for Squeers, and a smaller one for his assistant. During the lessons, the boys sat quietly, shaking with the cold. Letters from home were opened in front of the whole class, and Squeers took all their money. He did the same with packages of clothes. If the boys complained, Squeers hit them with a big stick. Nicholas watched this happen with tears of anger in his eyes, but he felt powerless to do anything. Squeers gave to his son, young Wackford, all the clothes that he stole from the boys. He, of course, was the only boy in the school who was never cold and hungry. He was also as nasty as his father. His favourite activity was kicking the other boys and making them cry. If they tried to defend themselves, young Wackford reported them to his father, and they were cruelly punished. Nicholas's heart was filled with pity for these poor children, who suffered such cruel treatment. All the beauty of innocence had disappeared from their pale, thin faces. He never heard them laughing, and there was no hope in their dull, empty eyes. He was especially sorry for the boy called Smike. He was older than the other boys, about 18 or 19 years old. He was tall for his age, but wore children's clothes that were much too short for him. He did not have lessons, but was made to do all the hard, dirty jobs around the school. If he did something wrong, Mr. Squeers beat him and shouted at him. Smike had been left at the school many years earlier by parents who did not want him. However, Squeers still received money for him from somewhere. He kept him at the school because he was useful. One evening, Nicholas sat on his hard wooden bed in the crowded, unheated room that he shared with several other boys. He was thinking sadly of home, when suddenly he remembered the letter which the man with wild eyes had given him. He took it out of his pocket and read, "My dear young man, I know the world. Your father did not, and you do not either. If you knew the world, you would not go on this journey. If you ever want help in London, don't be angry. Go to the Crown Hotel in Golden Square. They will give you my address. You can come at night. Many years ago, people were not ashamed to know me. Now things are different, but that is not important. There is no future. Newman Noggs." While Nicholas was putting the letter back in his pocket, a strange thing happened to him. His eyes filled with tears. The next day, Nicholas saw Smike on his knees, trying to light a fire. Smike looked up at Nicholas with a frightened expression. "Don't be afraid," Nicholas said kindly. "I'm not going to hurt you. Are you cold?" Smike covered his face with his thin, dirty hands and started crying. "My heart will break if I stay in this horrible place," he said. "Before you arrived, a boy died here. He was my last friend. Just before he died, his face was lit up by a lovely smile. He said that he could see the faces of his friends around his bed. They had come from home, and they were smiling and talking to him. What faces will smile at me when I die? There's no hope for me, alive or dead. No hope." "There's always hope," Nicholas said gently, resting his hand on the boy's bony shoulder. Eventually, Smike stopped crying and moved away, like a frightened animal, into the shadows. Nicholas sighed sadly and went to bed.
Chapter 3. Fanny Squeers. "When did he ask you to marry him?" "Oh, he hasn't asked me yet," Fanny said.
Wackford Squeers had a 22-year-old daughter, Fanny, who was short and ugly like her father. One evening she was having dinner with her parents while they were discussing Nicholas. Fanny had never met Nicholas because she was staying with her friend Tilda when he arrived. She therefore listened to her parents' conversation with interest. When she heard her father say that he was the son of a gentleman, she became very interested. Later that night, she asked her servant about the new teacher. She heard that he had beautiful dark eyes, long straight legs, and a sweet smile. She decided that she wanted to meet this interesting young man as soon as possible. The next day, she went into the schoolroom, pretending that she needed a pen. When she saw Nicholas, her face went red. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought my father was here. Oh, how embarrassing." "Mr. Squeers is out," Nicholas explained politely. "Could you lend me a pen?" the young lady asked, looking shyly at her feet. "He does have a beautiful smile," she thought, giving him a secret sideways look. Nicholas gave her a pen, and Fanny left the classroom. Outside the door, she held the pen to her heart. "I've never seen such wonderful legs," she sighed, walking away in a dream. Minutes later, she put on her hat and coat and hurried out of the school. "I have to tell Tilda about him," she thought. Fanny was jealous of Tilda Price, who was 5 years younger than her. A week earlier, a farmer, John Browdy, had asked Tilda to marry him. "Now I can tell her that I'm going to get married too," Fanny thought. Tilda was surprised when she heard Fanny's news. "This is wonderful," she said. "When did he ask you to marry him?" "Oh, he hasn't asked me yet," Fanny said, "but I know that he wants to. He smiles at me in a very special way." "Oh, Fanny," Tilda said, hugging her friend, "I'm so happy for you. When can I meet the lucky young man?" "In 2 days' time, my parents are away on business. Then you and John can both come for tea." "What a lovely idea," Tilda said excitedly. I can't wait." 2 days later, Tilda arrived early at Dotheboys Hall. "John will be here later," she explained. "He's gone home to wash and change his clothes." The two girls helped each other with their hair and clothes, then went downstairs. While Fanny was talking excitedly about her future husband, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Fanny called nervously. "Good evening," Nicholas said, a look of surprise on his face. He had expected to find Mr. Squeers. "Father can't be with us today," Fanny said. "But that only makes it better for us, doesn't it?" Nicholas thought that these words were strange, but he paid no attention to them. He greeted Tilda politely and stood calmly by the window. "Don't be embarrassed," Tilda said, smiling at him. "I don't mind what you two do in front of me. You can pretend that I'm not here." "Tilda!" Fanny said, her face going red. The two girls started laughing. Nicholas thought that the girls' behavior was so silly that he started laughing too. Soon the three of them were sitting happily at the table, eating bread and butter and drinking tea. 10 minutes later, John Browdy arrived. He was a big, strong man, but he was not very good at conversation. He seemed happy just to eat bread and butter. When the plates were empty, John stared at Nicholas and said,
"You're a lucky man to have bread and butter here."
"What do you mean, sir?" Nicholas replied.
"The last teacher nearly died of hunger," John laughed. "Mr. Squeers doesn't like spending money."
Nicholas went red with anger, and he told Mr. Browdy to apologize for his rudeness in front of Mr. Squeers's daughter. Tilda was angry too. "If you say another word, John," she said, "I'll never speak to you again." Then she turned to Nicholas and whispered, "John and I will go into the kitchen. We'll leave you two alone for a few minutes." "Why do you want to do that?" Nicholas asked, confused. "Mr. Nickleby, I'm shocked. Look at poor Miss Squeers. She was so excited about today, and she's dressed so prettily because of you." "Because of me? Why?" Tilda looked at Nicholas with a strange smile. "Does this handsome man think that I'm more beautiful than Fanny?" she thought. "Perhaps he doesn't want to marry her now." "Let's have a game of cards," she said suddenly. "There are only 4 of us, Tilda," Fanny said, looking at Nicholas out of the corner of her eye. "We'd better play with partners, hadn't we? 2 against 2. "What do you think, Mr. Nickleby?" Tilda asked. "I'll be happy to be your partner, Miss Price," Nicholas replied. "Mr. Browdy," Fanny said, looking at Tilda angrily, "will you be my partner?" John Browdy agreed, although he could not understand why Fanny seemed so upset. "We're going to win everything," Nicholas said cheerfully after he and Tilda had won the first game. "I think Tilda has already won something that you didn't expect. Haven't you, dear?" Fanny said nastily. "Only a game of cards, my dear," Tilda replied, pretending not to understand. She was enjoying Fanny's jealousy. "How boring you are tonight," Fanny said with a bitter smile. "Not at all," Tilda replied. "I'm in an excellent mood. I was thinking that you seemed unusually boring tonight." "Me?" Fanny cried, biting her lip and shaking jealously. "And your hair's beginning to look untidy," Tilda said. The two friends' argument became worse and worse. Finally, Fanny started crying. "Tilda, I hate you," she shouted. "I feel the same way about you," Tilda said. John Browdy hit the table hard with his enormous hand.
"I've had enough," he shouted. "I'm going home."
"Me too," Tilda said, standing up and putting on her hat. She hurried out of the room, followed by John Browdy. Nicholas looked at Fanny. He was unsure of what to do. Fanny was crying into her handkerchief, shouting things at the closed door. After a few minutes, he quietly left the room. "In a horrible place like this, I need all the friends I can get," he said to himself. "But instead, I only seem to make enemies. What have I done?" With these unhappy thoughts, he climbed into his dirty, cold bed. But as he lay awake, listening to the other boys in their beds, crying with cold and hunger, he soon forgot his own problems. "Why do places as terrible as this exist?" he thought angrily. "These poor children are treated worse than animals. Why do their families send them here?" The next day, things became even worse. When it became clear that Nicholas did not love her, Fanny was filled with anger and confusion. She could not understand why a poor teacher like him did not find her attractive. In addition to this, he had embarrassed her in front of her friend. This showed that Nicholas was not grateful to her father for giving him a job. "Well," she thought, "he has an enemy instead of a friend. I'm going to make life very difficult for him." She noticed that Smike seemed to like Nicholas a lot. He followed the young teacher everywhere and was happy just to be near him. Fanny complained about this to her father, who began to treat Smike even more roughly than before. One January morning, Smike disappeared. Squeers and his wife went out to look for him, and eventually found him several miles away by the side of the road. He was covered in mud, frozen, tired, and hungry. They tied his hands and feet together and brought him back to the school. Then Squeers ordered everybody to go to the schoolroom. He pulled Smike into the room and threw him onto the floor.
"Have you anything to say?"
Squeers said to Smike, lifting a stick above his head.
"Please don't hit me, sir,"
Smike cried. Squeers laughed and brought the stick down hard on the boy's back. Smike screamed with pain, while the other boys watched silently. Squeers lifted the stick again, but a loud voice shouted, "Stop!"
"Who said that?"
demanded Squeers, turning round angrily. "I did," said Nicholas.
"Sit down,"
Squeers told him angrily. He lifted his stick to hit Smike again, but Nicholas moved quickly towards him. "I warn you not to touch him," he said. "I've seen enough of your evil school and your treatment of the children here." Without warning, Squeers screamed wildly and hit Nicholas across the face with his stick. Nicholas immediately jumped on Squeers, took the stick from his hand, and began to hit him. Mrs. Squeers and Fanny tried to pull Nicholas away, but Nicholas was too strong for them all. He pushed them off and threw the schoolmaster across the room. Squeers hit the wall hard and sank to the floor without moving. Nicholas looked around, but he could not see Smike. After a moment's thought, he decided that he had no choice. He had to leave the school immediately. He packed his bag quickly and marched out of the front door into the snow. After walking for a few miles, he calmed down and thought about his situation more clearly. He did not know how he was going to get to London. He only had a little money, and London was over 250 miles away. While Nicholas was worrying about this, he noticed a man on a horse riding towards him. It was John Browdie. They exchanged greetings, but did not smile. After a few seconds' silence, Nicholas said, "I'm very sorry about our argument. It was my fault. Will you shake hands?" John Browdie jumped down from his horse with a big smile and shook hands. Then he noticed the cuts on Nicholas's face. When Nicholas told him what had happened, he laughed and shook his hand again.
"You've beaten the schoolmaster," he said. "That's the best thing I've heard for years. I love you for it."
But he became more serious when Nicholas told him about his plan to walk to London. He pulled an old purse out of his pocket and gave Nicholas enough money for the coach journey. Nicholas tried to refuse, but John Browdie did not listen.
"Good luck, young man,"
he said, when Nicholas had finally accepted the money. With a cheerful wave, he climbed back onto his horse and rode away, laughing loudly. Nicholas continued his journey, but he did not travel far that afternoon. It was nearly dark, and there had been a heavy fall of snow. So he went into an empty farmhouse and fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning, he saw a dark shape sitting in front of him. It was Smike. "What are you doing here?" Nicholas asked with surprise.
"I want to go with you," the boy replied. "You're the only friend I have. Please take me with you."
"I'm as poor and lonely as you are," Nicholas said. "How can I help you?"
"Please," the boy begged. "I'll be your servant. I won't ask for anything. I only want to be near you."
Nicholas agreed, and Smike's face lit up with happiness. He did not know where they were going, but he did not care. He was with his friend and away from Dotheboys Hall. That was enough to fill his heart with happiness.